Welcome back to Posture Labs and Alignment Fundamentals. My name is Emma. Thank you so much for joining me and for finding my channel. We are on episode 11 of this series, and today we will be covering Parivrtta Trikonasana, or Revolved Triangle. I highly recommend you go check out last week's Posture Lab, which was Pyramid Pose, because the alignment, the setup is very, very similar. So once you get the foundation for that, this is kind of like an extension of the pose. I definitely recommend grabbing a block here if you have one. If you don't have one, I will always give you options without the blocks as well. I just think for certain poses like this one, the blocks are super, super helpful. All right, let's go ahead and jump right into things. We're gonna start with our right leg. So right foot forward. Now, if you did watch that pyramid pose video, which I highly recommend doing, you already know our nice setup here is about 3 feet, about 1 meter stance. Your back toes are turned out at a 45-degree angle, and your right toes are pointing forward. Now, you're trying to square your hips as much as you can towards the front of your mat, because especially this time we're going to be adding a twist in the opposite direction. So if you already are struggling to square your hips, the twisting in the other direction is going to be even harder. So let's try to make sure we have that good alignment first. Now, coming into your pyramid pose, I want you to bring your block on the inside of your right foot. I would recommend starting at the medium height at least, maybe the tall height. Coming into your pyramid pose, you're having this block on the inside of your right foot. So maybe you put your hand on the block to start, or maybe you just put your hands on the mat. First, make sure you have your good setup here, the fold over the right leg. Now, I want you to put your left hand onto the block, and you really want to line your left fingertips up with your toe tips. So you want to try to make sure this block is in line with the front of your foot. Try to avoid gripping the block here and just putting a flat palm down. That way it's going to feel the most like the regular ground would, and not like you're actually having something to hold on to and help stabilize you. So try to do flat palm if possible, and not gripping. Now I'm pressing down with my left hand. I like to bring the right hand to the right hip as I start to turn my torso to the right. At this point for me, I like to back my back foot up a little bit. So I want to try to get this turn of the torso to the right. As I'm doing that, I'm avoiding swaying my hips all the way over to the right and crunching the right side oblique. I actually want to try to push my hips in the opposite direction. It's going to make it more challenging. You'll feel it more through your torso. I want your right side body to stay as long as possible. Press the outer edge of your left foot down and the ball of your right foot down. Squeeze your inner thighs and kind of shift some weight back into this left leg. That's your anchor leg, and it will help you feel a little bit more stable. Once you get there, right hand on the hip or maybe to the low back. If you feel comfortable, you can reach your right arm up, and that's really going to help you deepen this twist. Now keep thinking about the outer hips hugging in towards each other and bumping the hips a little bit to the left. Eventually, you might like to take your gaze up at your right hand. Try to avoid dropping your head. Think nice long spine. Tailbone going back, spine nice and straight, crown of the head going forward for 3. Turning at the torso, expanding the chest, 2, and 1. Let's go ahead and unwind, bring it back up. Now, you can definitely get in from this pyramid pose. What you might find helpful is getting in kind of how we do in primary series, or maybe some other lineages of yoga. That's just what I would be familiar with. So starting with the right foot or left foot forward this time, let's go ahead and place that block inside the left foot and get your good setup, but we're gonna start standing. So left foot forward, right toes out on a 45-degree angle. I've got my block inside my left foot. Bringing my hands to my waist, try to square the hips over the left leg. Squeeze the legs, maybe a little micro bend to avoid hyperextending, and now I wanna reach my right arm up. So I'm really gonna inhale, lengthen through this right side. Imagine I could reach up and touch the ceiling. Then I'm gonna reach my right hand forward, almost beyond my block and beyond my foot. So I'm really lengthening through this right side now. Then I'm bringing my right hand down to the block. I wanna make sure my shoulder is over my wrist, not past my wrist. So that's why I'm shifting some weight back into my right leg. That's the anchor. Try to avoid gripping the block, just press your flat palm down. I've still got my left hand on my waist. I kind of want to tug my left waist back and then think about bumping the hips a little to the right. Feel really sturdy through my legs. I should feel a nice twist through my lower abdomen here. Try to engage. Maybe reach your left arm up. Keep shifting the hips a bit to the right. Expand your chest to the left. Maybe look up at your left hand for 3. Active press down into your right hand, 2. Shoulder blades draw together a bit to open your chest, 1. Come back up. All right, this pose can be very challenging, especially if you have tight hamstrings and find pyramid pose challenging in itself. Keep in mind, you can always put a little bend in your front knee. Really try not to bend your back knee. I mean, once your pose starts looking like this, I'm gonna go ahead and just tell you to take kind of like a revolved runner's lunge, so at least you're getting a twist and you're not compromising your form. However, a little bend in the front knee might be helpful to begin. So you still have that back anchor leg, little bend in the left knee, and you can feel like you can still bump your hips a little bit to the right and still get quite a bit out of the pose that way. Feel free to do that, but really try to work toward just like a little micro bend. We want the legs to appear straight. Notice your feet as you're in this pose. When the poses become more challenging or stressful, you might notice you're kind of gripping the mat with the toes. And I want you to think lighter toes, press down more through like the big toe mound of your foot, the pinky toe mound, and even into the outside edges and the heels, less gripping with the toes. Think about your spine getting nice and long, the tailbone's going towards the back of the mat and the crown of the head forward. You're kind of just wringing out the muscles around the spine, not so much bending the spine itself. Let's see what else would be helpful here. Activate your legs, just like in pyramid pose. I like to think about squeezing the inner thighs towards each other, almost like you have magnets on your inner thighs and they're trying to pull towards each other when you do this. Your outer hips, that cue I gave about squeezing your outer hips together, like almost think like someone's pressing your hips together and you're trying to make your hips a little bit more narrow. That way you're really gonna get that nice twist and swing of the hips in the opposite direction without swaying the hips to one side and crunching into your torso. That's pretty much all I have for Parivrtta Trikonasana. However, I do want to give you a variation without the block because I understand not everyone has one. You can always use like a tall water bottle, like a hydro flask or something that's pretty thick to put your hand on. But if you do not have that, I would recommend, let's go ahead and do the right foot first. So coming up from standing, right hand to the right hip, get your feet set up on railroad tracks. Little micro bend in your knees, reach your left arm up, inhale, reach forward, and then down. You might like to use your fingertips, that's gonna give you a little bit of extra leverage, or you might like to grab kind of the inside of your right shin and turn your torso to the right. Now this to me is not nearly as good of a pose because you're grabbing using your left hand. Also, I don't have the same rotation of this left arm. I'm kind of compromising that. However, to me, it's a good second option. I would rather you not dump super forward and do something like this. Really try to use a block. If you need to, you can widen your stance a little bit. Maybe even walk your hand a little bit more to the left. That might give you a little bit more space. Grabbing onto the shin is going to be an okay option. I don't love it, but it is what it is, and really it's just yoga. So I want you to make sure you're doing it safely and as correct as possible, but at the end of the day, if you're happy with the stretch and it feels okay in your body, then go ahead and do that. Otherwise, purchase a block. There's definitely cheap ones out there on Amazon, or use a household object. So that is Revolved Triangle. If you have any questions about this pose, I know it can be pretty confusing. Go ahead and let me know. One modification I do really like before I close up is using your top hand at your low back. So if I'm going to come into my Revolved Triangle pose with the left foot forward and the left arm up, Left arm up can be a lot for most people with this left shoulder. You might like to bring your left hand to your lower back. That way you can kind of feel the evenness of your hips, and it also feels like a little bit less work on this left shoulder. So I can bring my left hand to my low back. I can continue to open my chest to the left as I do this, expand my collarbones, but I'm not really reaching up. I'm not getting that work through the left arm. So left hand to the low back or even the hip is a really nice option to try to keep the hips nice and level. It's really easy to kind of sink out of this pose. Naturally, your body wants to find an easier shape, so that's going to be the hips going in the direction you don't want them to. So just constantly being mindful of swinging the hips in the opposite direction and squeezing your legs. Let me know if you have any comments, questions, concerns, or if there are any cues or tips that you really like in this pose, because I'm always open to learning those as well. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time.